colleagues. I feel like I know more and more people who've gotten the vaccine, in the past 2-3 weeks. So I think that makes all of us really optimistic. So I appreciate everybody joining us for our quarterly site tour. So we do these once a quarter at NOLA BA. We started this series as an in-person site tour, where we, got on a bus and went to a number of different industrial sites in New Orleans East, pivoted to the online model, and it's really been able to open up different categories of workspaces and business spaces across the city. So thank you all for joining again. My name's Louis David. I'm the Vice President of Industry Attraction and Retention at NOLA BA. And my goal with this series, along with my colleagues, Chandra Tettleton and Valerie Huntley, is really to let people inside New Orleans as well as outside the market know what types of properties are available in New Orleans. Give a good overview of the type of price range, the type of different office spaces. I think especially during the pandemic, we've all gotten really familiar with our individual neighborhoods. So I think this is a great opportunity for everybody to come together and take a look at what's available across the city. So let's get started. And like I said, we will be recording this presentation. It will be available on nolaba.org and our social media channels. So we will also be sending out, everybody who RSVP'd will get a link to this presentation as well as the PDF of the presentation in an email. And feel free to send that to colleagues or anybody else you think who may be interested. We really want this content to be available to anybody who is interested in learning more about New Orleans. So just a quick overview of the agenda. I wanted to go over some national office trends because, like I'm sure everybody on this webinar knows, we're hearing new stuff every day about what the office market looks like. The residential real estate market, we've seen what it looks like across New Orleans and across just different parts of the country. Generally it's been very strong with low interest rates, but office market is something that everybody's had a big question mark around, just based off of who's going to be able to work in an office, when, and will they want to, and will they need to? We obviously don't have all those answers today, but we're going to take a look at some of the trends that some national experts are saying. I also wanted to touch on a couple of things about the New Orleans office market. Everybody here knows that every market, residential, industrial, commercial in New Orleans, is unique. So we've got some unique dynamics at play in the New Orleans market. So we wanted to kind of set the stage with that. Then we're going to get into our panel with brokers from Urban Properties and Corporate Realty. So Genevieve Douglas and Austin Lavin will be joining us. They're each going to talk about a property that they're excited about, but also just kind of general trends in the market. I really look to them to let us know, are you seeing clients come to you looking for new spaces? What are clients looking for when they're looking for spaces? What are developers looking at when they're looking at getting new spaces out on the market? Then we're going to take our virtual property tour, which will kick off with a video. I was all over iMovie for the past couple days, shot a cool tour of the Cajun Brewing Company headquarters with John Renthrope. They have a cool, very serene, very not traditionally New Orleans office space in New Orleans East. So we'll show that off with a little video and then go through a couple of other properties that I thought were unique on the smaller office side. And then some Q&As, and we've also, so once again, put your questions in the chat box for Austin or Genevieve, and then we have gone ahead and set the dates for the virtual site tour series throughout the year. And like I put in the invitation, if you have a topic that you think we should be covering, commercial, industrial, let me know, and we're definitely going to look into that. So I wanted to start off with some national office trends. So CBRE put out a 2021 office occupier US study. And it was actually a pretty interesting and kind of like short and brief document. And these were the headlines. And this was, once again, looking at 2021 rather, at office markets across the country. So their headline was "The office downturn will start to stabilize." So I think everybody here, is almost exactly a year ago that we all started working from our homes, or not working from our offices, or working from our offices less. And even when you look back 3 or 6 months ago, there was a lot more questions around when will we be able to be back together in any type of setting. I think, we will end this calendar year knowing a lot more about what that timetable looks like. The CBRE said that is definitely, the downturn in office, they expect to stabilize, not recover in 2021, but to stabilize. Downtowns, they predict, will be the last to recover across the country. People are finding out that they may need not to commute to get the work done that they've done in the past. That's probably less of a factor in New Orleans because our commute times for the South Shore especially are fairly lower. But when you look at some other major metros where people are commuting, an hour into downtown, I can really see that. But they also highlighted that, suburban and office spaces in more residential areas will be some of the first to recover. So that kind of fits in with our theme today of looking at, some small office spaces that aren't necessarily in the CBD. Flight to quality was one that I thought was interesting. They expect when people make a move, either if your lease is up or if you're looking at downsizing, they expect tenants to really say, I want these amenities, and I want, fitness, or I want to be close to restaurants, or I want newly renovated space, or I want space that's been custom renovated for my business. So that's really going to depend on what landlords are willing to invest in their space. CBRE right now is predicting that remote work will lead to about a 15% drop in demand for office space in 2021. So, I think that's definitely going to be market to market. I would see us kind of right in the middle for lots of different factors that we'll go over a little bit for what some of the local trends are. Obviously, less new product. That's not a huge, we don't see new high rises going up in our area. We just don't. But we do have a number of new build office products in the market. But in markets where you see, 2 or 3 big projects under construction, they're predicting that you'll see less new projects come out of the ground this year, which is definitely understandable. Another kind of good point for New Orleans is that they lumped in basically major metro areas in the Southeast as winners out of 2021 relatively. Not saying that everything's on fire in the Southeast, but they specifically called out Atlanta, Nashville, the Texas markets where the cost of living's lower, the cost of doing business is lower, and there's more of a demand today for things to be back to 2019 levels than there are in some of the Northeastern and West Coast markets. And they specifically called out markets where a lot of people commute by train. That will be the slowest to recover. New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, Philadelphia. So that puts us in one of these better categories. So to look at what's going on in New Orleans, all of the companies on your screen have made commitments to expand in New Orleans in the past year and a half. Really only a few of these were before Testronic, I believe, may have been the only company that made that commitment before the pandemic. But, these are a lot of software companies. Obviously, we had, the mega deal with Shutterstock buying Turbo Squid and kind of galvanizing their commitment to remain in the New Orleans market. Keyword Studios bought one of our other big video game studios here downtown. And we've had a number of smaller firms, announce their plans to grow in the New Orleans market. ProKeep's homegrown. Recurly is a San Francisco company where they had a few people in New Orleans, and they are now hiring in all their non-San Francisco markets currently. So New Orleans is one of those markets. So if you go look, they have a number of job openings in New Orleans in the software development space. But then also we have had a number of food and food manufacturing companies. Louisiana Pepper Exchange, they announced a big capital infusion, and they're expanding their capabilities in New Orleans. So, when you may think of office in New Orleans, you may think it's dead, just if you just read headlines, which I know no one on this webinar just reads headlines. But, these are all companies in growing industries who have said, we're going to grow in New Orleans, and mostly since, last May, or last March rather. So that's, our momentum in our key growth industries in New Orleans continues. Also, I'm personally optimistic about where our health data is trending. So as of yesterday, we had 450,000 fully vaccinated people in Louisiana. That's either both doses of Pfizer or Moderna, or one dose of Johnson & Johnson. That's about 10% of our population. That's a better figure than many of our neighbors or many of the states on East and West Coast. Also, Orleans Parish, even though we were really the first place in Louisiana to feel the effects of Corona, and unfortunately lost many of our neighbors, had many of our neighbors go through the illness. Today, we are third lowest per capita for total cases in Louisiana parishes. So, when you look at where Corona started in Louisiana, no doubt about it, it was Orleans Parish. Obviously, we had so many visitors at the beginning of last year. But we are in a pretty enviable place as far as total cases. So that's something that we need to remember. And then, as we saw in the last slide, our key industries, especially our key growth industries, they're continuing to grow. The drive for technology uses, professional services, our legal industry is really probably one of the bigger industries that's back in the office, especially in the downtown area. Trade transportation, the port has been seeing all kinds of imports, exports. We've had lots of interest from manufacturing and distribution companies about sites in New Orleans and our area. And then bio, look at the growth from our bio scene over the past year. And I think with the increased awareness over public health and what access to public health will look like, that really will drive a lot of job growth in the metro area. And then, our residential real estate market has just been on fire. Everybody here knows that for the past year. It took a little break for that month or two, but the low interest rates really continue to show that people want to live in New Orleans. And some of these people are coming from outside the market, but strong residential real estate transactions just show that we're a desirable place to live. And if we're a desirable place to live, that means we're a desirable place to work. And then I wanted to show the Louisiana coronavirus tracker on the right-hand side from the New York Times. If you just look at all of our indicators, cases, deaths, hospitalizations in the past 2 weeks, all trending down in very strong ways, I believe. So, I'm excited about what the rest of the spring and the summer brings us. We're not in a perfect place, but I think we're heading in the right direction. And that gives us a lot of optimism when we look at people who may be tired of working at home for these, this past year, or looking at different ways to work in New Orleans. So I wanted to introduce our panel. We will have them talk about specific properties, but also just about kind of what they're seeing in the market. So thank you, Genevieve Douglas from Urban Properties and Austin Lavin from Corporate Realty. Thank you for joining us.
So glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I will start out just in order of the presentation. Genevieve, what are you seeing with office tenants and what tenants are looking for today versus a year and a half ago?
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of small teams and like smaller representation of larger companies, like national and global companies that are based here in New Orleans. Like they're smaller teams looking for space that are definitely more flexible and accessible space as opposed to, you know, larger environments, larger office environments. So that's everything from tech to design and architecture, civil engineering, law, and even a little bit of maritime as well, have been users that we've been seeing come to market or need space.
And are those people new to the market or have they been working at home? Like, where are they coming from?
Yeah. So some are new and some are expanding and already here, or some are bringing like their smaller team to this market.
So you're seeing companies that didn't have any footprint in New Orleans kind of create small ones just of people who wanted to live here.
Yeah, correct. So some people that, you know, could work from home that were based in a different market that wanted to just live in New Orleans for a few months. We're seeing some of that with some small office users or some flex office and in the co-working space. But we're also seeing like certain companies that want to expand as well. They're already here. Or like that went home for a time and that are coming back to the market. Like, you know, like their lease ended and they didn't want to renew at the time, but now are ready to renew and start something new.
So Austin, I know you have leased a lot of space in the towers all around downtown New Orleans. What are you seeing anybody say, hey, I'm looking for a different environment now that the world has changed a little?
Sure. Well, the world is still changing and nobody knows where it's going and nobody can tell you definitively, you know, where we're going to end up or what people are going to do. So I think one of the things that people are looking for is flexibility, which is sort of innately the opposite of what landlords and developers are trying to do with real estate, which requires long-term commitments. I mean, I am coming to you from the 44th floor of Place St. Charles, one of the tallest office buildings between Atlanta and Houston. There are people downtown, there are people in this building. There are certainly fewer people than there have been, and people are coming in at different schedules and for different things, but the office buildings are still pretty active. I think what we saw a lot of last year is, again, companies not looking to make larger commitments. So Corporate Realty puts together an office report where we do an inventory of all the office buildings greater than 20,000 square feet in the market. And we analyze that, and we're about to publish it later this month, which you can find on our website, which is very cool. I happen to help produce it, so I have a lot of our data in front of us. And you know, there was a dip. I mean, there's more sublease space available, but it's not substantial. I mean, we're talking about percentage points. Most companies in, you know, large scale office space sign long-term leases, and their office space is a line item in their budget that they have, you know, planned to spend, you know, for however many years. So I think if you saw somebody look for a sublease or try to get out, it was because of other problems, not because they're rethinking how they use office space. Now that we're in 2021, I mean, as you said, a lot more people are getting vaccinated. People can see the end of the road, or, you know, pick your cliche. They, you know, if you're saying I need office space now, it might take 3 months or 4 months. So we're almost talking about opening in the fall. So you're starting to see people poke around. I got a call from a law firm based in Texas that wants to open a small shop near the courthouses yesterday, and they want to be in a tower. They want to sign a 3-year lease. There's not as many of those right this second, but they're poking their heads up, and people are looking to make commitments.
Genevieve, you guys are in a pretty cool small space on Magazine Street in the Lower Garden District. I guess what do you think are some of the benefits of a smaller office space in the different neighborhoods in the city?
For sure. So we actually bought our building last February, right before everything happened. So it was an interesting time in general because we wanted to develop the property to be a co-working space. So we were getting ready to launch that, and then COVID happened. But in general, it's a market, it's a part of town that our firm really wanted to be in, and we really believe in the Lower Garden District and what was starting to expand here with the businesses. And this was even a little bit, I think, before this, well, maybe very close to right before like the St. Vincent commitment. And we had, worked with lots of other brokerage firms and developers to do different projects here, such as Framework right down the road on Magazine Street. So being in the Lower Garden District, we just thought was a really good investment for the firm and a really good real estate play as far as what was going on with development and just the energy in the city.
Cool. And I asked Austin and Genevieve to kind of talk about some properties that I thought were really unique. So Genevieve, I'll pull up the one that you're working on. That's 353 Carondelet, which is the Fidelity Bank building right across from the back of One Shell, and it's very 60s Mad Men, but totally new renovation.
Yes, for sure. It was a historic redevelopment, and the PRC especially was adamant about retaining the 60s facade that was actually a redone facade. It wasn't the original of the building. It was a little bit more historic, and then it got redone. So it's very mid-century modern, and it was redeveloped for Fidelity Bank's headquarters on the first 2 floors. But it's a 4-story building, about 8,000 square foot total. 80,000 square foot total. And it has the top 2 floors that are empty right now, but have been completely redone, are available for office lease. So it's a really interesting space because it seems like it's part of a larger downtown building, but it's really its own little 4-story space. And it's just such a small footprint, but to be in an amazing part of the CBD where a lot of traction's happening right now with the streetcar line right there, and a lot of new restaurants actually have popped up right around there as well. So it's just a really interesting space, and not having to share it with a lot of other users is really attractive as well, and having less touch points as far as safety and security. It would be a really secure environment to work in, and you wouldn't really have to share the elevator with hardly anyone because they just have the first 2 floors. So yeah, it's really perfect for a user that could utilize both the 3rd and 4th floor together, and maybe a type of business that would be complementary to the bank below, such as a lender or a law firm or that kind of thing. So yeah, we've had some interesting interest. I mean, it definitely has its challenges. It doesn't come with parking, for example. And we definitely have noticed, and I'm sure Austin will nod his head at this too, that the gross lease is what office users really want. Triple net, I feel can be challenging for them. So this actually, it started out as a triple net and became a gross lease. So that is really exciting. It's about 7,500 square feet total for both of those floors.
Yeah, and the Fidelity's build out is really swanky. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the shop at the CAC, that co-working space. It's very, kind of modern in a historic context. And you bring up a good point too. We're generally working from home at NOLA BA. I'm in the office today, but a couple of weeks ago, I hadn't been downtown in the CBD daytime in a month or so, and I just kind of walked around, and I was shocked at the new restaurants that have opened. Unfortunately, obviously, we're going to see some we have seen some restaurant closures and some of the amenities that make downtown
Right.
awesome. But I was like, wow, you got to give it to these entrepreneurs who are
Yeah.
opening up during this time.
Yeah, for
Well, you have to
sure.
remember, Louis, a lot of those people started 6, 7
Yeah.
a year ago.
Yeah.
So they had maybe unfortunate time. And I do think you're going to see a lot of new restaurants pop up as people want to take over second generation spaces and move forward, and especially capitalize on all the excitement happening this fall. So
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually did the olive lease next to the building,
Oh, okay.
which is a new restaurant. So that
Yeah.
was exciting for them. And I was so glad to see Kolache on the block as well. That was really cool.
I
Yeah,
like
oh,
I
go
like
ahead.
their breakfast tacos.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Me too. And the price point is insane.
So
I'm like,
cheap.
no one tell them how cheap they are. No one.
Yeah.
Please. So, but yeah, a big shout out to Chaplain Pierre, who did the architecture, and a really great nod to that mid-century. And then Ryan Gouty was the contractor on the project. And we actually got to project manage the build out. Our firm did with our director of project management, Michael Bucher. So it was a really we have a lot invested emotionally and with our blood, sweat, and tears on this project. So we love it.
Cool project. So yeah, if anybody's interested, Genevieve and the urban team are the best way to get it. Tyler and Henry are also working on that project. I want to talk about this really cool listing that I thought Austin has. It's this awesome live workspace. And I think we sometimes hear about live work as a concept. It's in the warehouse district, but it really kind of has some unique opportunities. I think, especially for any business that needs to be close to the convention center, and just really likes that flexible. It looks like a really cool New York Soho loft, but I thought it was a really unique property. So Austin, what do you want to tell us about this property?
well, I think you did a good job selling it. I appreciate that. This is a great example of how companies are being flexible about office space right now and their space in general. It was operated by a company that did a lot of work in the convention center with booths and signage and whatnot. They have a large warehouse office presence in Kenner, and they had a small 800 square foot, basically a showroom across the street from the convention center. And as conventions dried up and things were changing, they realized they didn't need this space right now. And so they were willing to put it on the market. They are not selling it. They might come back to it, but for a couple of years, they're interested in thinking about it differently. And it is an old warehouse with huge ceilings, big windows, frontage onto a park, which is very unusual in the CBD. And I think many people would look at this and say, this is a great retail opportunity. This should be a coffee shop. This should be a little restaurant or maybe an art gallery. And it might, I think it probably will be in the future. But for right now, when there are some of those other retail spaces available, we are looking at this as potentially an office space for somebody who is a handful of people who want low touch points. You walk in and out of your own space, you have your own patio. That gives you a lot of flexibility, and it touches on things that people are looking for right now. It's also built out, and so you can lease it for a year, for 2 years, and then figure out how the world is changing.
I feel like, obviously how we entertain in our personal lives has changed, but we're going to start taking baby steps into entertaining in a business sense. And I think that could be a really cool option for, a company that wants to entertain in a smaller way and interact with people. And if you control everything, that could lead to, more comfort for, the people you're trying to entertain. And, I could just see lots of hey, have a 10, 15 person event there on a regular basis, where you have a lot of the control.
It's a great space for that. It's a great space for any company that's looking for visibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I think we'll find the right tenant for it fairly soon. I also think you've seen a couple other examples. The owners are not selling it. They do plan to potentially come back to it, but right now they're not using it. So they're trying to most effectively monetize their space. So we're excited about the opportunity.
I want to ask you about that too. A lot of people have come up to me and said, "Oh, when are these retail landlords going to change their rent structure to be able to just take in office users because they need, something coming in the door better than zero?"
Well,
What's your take on that?
it's not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, there's a huge delta between what office tenants pay and retail tenants pay. And New Orleans office space, it's hard for some people to hear this, but it's really affordable. I mean, you could rent Class A office space with a build out with, on a high floor for $21, $22 a square foot when you're looking at similar space in other and really truly large cities at 2, 3, 4 times as much money. So office space is affordable and retail space is not. You're looking at $35, $40. And while there are plenty of landlords, I think, who are willing to entertain short-term discounts or be creative on the front end to offer tenants an opportunity to step up, I mean, they're just not. I mean, again, we see the end of this where people are looking at their calendars and saying, we're going to have Jazz Fest, we're going to have French Quarter Fest, we're going to have the Saints in the Superdome this fall. I mean, in 6 months, 9 months, this is a different world. I'm not going to give a discount indefinitely or encumber myself with what I see as a bad lease. So I think we're not going to see office space really retail space turning to office space unless you have some pretty specific spaces like this one on South Peters, which could go a little bit either way. I mean, it's priced, because it's so small on a per square foot basis, it's very expensive for office space. But as an overall, dollar per month, it's pretty affordable. And what we might see are firms looking and saying, well, we might not need as much space as we had before, so we will rent something much smaller, and we can pay more for it. But otherwise it doesn't make sense.
Gotcha. Okay, well, Austin and Genevieve, thanks for the insights. We're going to continue our tour across the city, but come back to both of you towards the end for some Q&A. So if anybody has some questions for Austin and Genevieve, put those in the chat box. So, oh yeah, one more. So I did want to continue our tour. Like I said, we're going to try to look at properties across the city. So we were just in downtown, in the warehouse district and the CBD, but this is a Cajun Fire Brewing Company and John Renthrope. John's a person I've known for almost my entire time at NOLA BA, and I knew his office space, and I think it's unique. And I was like, I really want to show off his office space just to show people, what kind of spaces are available in New Orleans East. So if you don't know about Cajun Fire Brewing Company, they were founded in New Orleans in 2011. They are the first Black-owned brewing company in Louisiana, and their beer brands really kind of, pay homage to the cultural influences in New Orleans and in South Louisiana. Named after Cajun and Creole and Mardi Gras Indian icons and African American community in New Orleans. So they're really, their brand is New Orleans, like a lot of our food and beverage products, which, that's a great thing to bank on. Our New Orleans brand sells. I know some of you all were in our food and beverage virtual site tour a few months ago, and that's what everybody tells us in the food space in New Orleans. So currently, they are headquartered in New Orleans East in the Deer Park office condominium complex. That is off Lake Forest Boulevard near Reed, in between Reed and Bullard. And it's really kind of like a park-like setting, and it's more of a product that you would associate with, the North Shore, maybe Baton Rouge, more of a suburban area, but it's got that convenience next to I-10 and, access to the New Orleans market. So I will go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to play the video once again. This is the first time we're playing a video. Y'all are all seeing history. Okay, stop sharing for that. And then I'm going to screen share for the video. Where's the video? Hold up. X, give me 1 second. Okay, that should be it. Screen share. Make sure the sound is on. Okay, can you guys all see this YouTube page? Thumbs up. Great. I will play the video. When you think of office space in New Orleans, you might immediately think of the big office towers downtown, or maybe even one of the really cool historic buildings where folks have offices across the city. But this park-like setting is the perfect home for Cajun Fire Brewing Company.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're at the Cajun Fire Headquarter office in Deer Park Condominiums in New Orleans East. Y'all follow me, I'm gonna show y'all our humble office. This office has not only been passed down in my family, but also it's very close to home. We're right in Lake Forest. We're right by the Methodist Hospital, as well as the Nature Center, the Audubon Park. So it has a lot of amenities built in. It's quiet, it's peaceful. It has all the high-tech things that I need to do business and be competitive, and also we have a community. So in this office happens the madness. I get to do my accounting, I do my checks and balances, my business, Zoom meetings, non-stop Zoom meetings, and also just kind of get my peace of mind to do work and carry out the business day. While we are right now headquartered in humble beginnings, we look to expand into a 5,000 square foot facility, also a museum and an adjoining tap room, and accommodate other manufacturing entities to produce products here in New Orleans. The kind of businesses I think would fit and this would really accommodate in Deer Park is pretty much X, Y, and Z. We have lawyers, we have attorneys, we have medical physicians. You know, there's all kind of different proprietors that call this office space home. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth. You know, it's 1 to 5,000 square foot office rooms. I think they can accommodate anything that you need in today's world. Other than that, look out for our products. We're available in Trader Joe's, Total Wine, Rouse's, well as 504 Craft Beer Reserve, Conseco's, Bromart. Please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, drinkcajunfire.com, and stay tuned. We're actively building a New Orleans East community. Thank you.
So I'm really excited about Cajun Fire's brewery, but as they work to get that project off the ground, I think they have a really cool space, where they kind of run all the operations in New Orleans. And then also I wanted to show that because I'll go ahead and skip forward. That's a condo product. So, there are some for lease and some for sale, which is, a little bit fairly unique in the New Orleans market. But that's a cool. So thank you, John, for showing off the company, and everybody try some Cajun Fire beer. You know where to find it now. I wanted to take a look at some other properties around the city that I thought were interesting. This is 1935 Sophie Wright Place. What an iconic look for a New Orleans office. And today, to have those French doors open and you're right across the street from that little park, right where Magazine Street splits, what a pleasant and creative space to be. That's right where Magazine splits. You're steps away from shopping, restaurants, fitness. It's really got that only in New Orleans feel, which I think we should all be taking more advantage of as we're Zooming more. I really think you could set up some cool shots in that office space if you're the type of business where you're Zooming a lot. A really reasonable price, I think, at $21.50 a square foot, customizable space. Once again, you've got the opportunity for frontage on Magazine Street, great signage possibilities. I just think it's a pretty building, and it's, a fantastic location in uptown New Orleans. Yeah.
Louis, just to build on a point that Genevieve made earlier, I think you should note if these are gross leases or triple net leases, or what the landlord is asking for, because I think you're going to see that all of these are priced pretty similarly, except for I think many of these are going to also ask for operating expenses, which are going to make them much more expensive than downtown offerings, for example.
Noted. That's a good idea. Okay, we'll send out that info when we send out the all this after the event. So I thought this was a cool building also. I mean, it's the former headquarters of Offbeat Magazine. That's pretty sweet. On Frenchman Street. You know, the Louisiana Music Factory also is in that building. What an opportunity to have this, you know, really unique and just a very New Orleans-y look. You know, lots of the beams, the wood floors, the exposed brick. And you really don't see that much office space come on the market in the Marigny, especially in this size. So you could get both of the two upper floors that are on the market. So, you know, 8,000 square feet, that's a good chunk of space. Or it's also, you know, could be in smaller increments. And I should have put the view from Frenchman. I mean, the view from the upper floors of that building as one of the pictures, because you can see, you know, across Frenchman, and as people start to get back with, you know, music and things like that, I'd imagine it'd just be a fun office space. And you can also see views of the quarter and the skyline in the background. I thought that's a cool space. Algiers, you know, directly across the river in historic Algiers, the space at 1400 Tesh Street was historically a corner store, drugstore, and then for the past 15 years or so has been used as medical office building. But it's a great opportunity to be in the Algiers market. You're super close to, you know, the historic Algiers Point area, the ferry landing, but also you're really well located to capture all of the folks along General de Gaulle, you know, in the rest of Algiers. And then if you have any business where you need to be on the west bank of Jefferson Parish, or you need to travel there on a regular basis, I think this is a great space, especially if for some reason, you know, you're in the legal field or mortgages or anything where you do a lot of work with the Jefferson Parish Courthouse. You know, this could be a great opportunity to be in the city, but also have quick access to the courthouses in Orleans and in Jefferson, because you've got the little annex in Algiers. So those are a couple spaces that I thought were interesting. I'm going to open up the chat and see if anybody has any questions, or feel free to speak up and we can get Austin and Genevieve's take on what we've all seen today. So I guess I'll start off with the questions. Austin and Genevieve, when do you, you know, I generally look at, so the airlines have continued to say that they'll be back up at full capacity probably by 24, 25. So I think New Orleans as a tourism destination will likely be on a similar timeline, because we have so many tourists who fly in. What do y'all see as the best date of when the office market starts to look like you think it will look like for a 5-year period?
Well, Louis, I mean, again, nobody who sits here and tells you they know what is going to happen is telling you the truth, because they don't know. But I think it's important to note that there's been two pretty big divides, and you have large national, international companies like Facebook or Chevron locally, or Ernst & Young, who have basically said, we're going to put this off until everybody's vaccinated, or the fall or spring or sometime soon. But you have many local companies who are actually operating in person in some capacity. And I think you're going to continue to see some sort of blend there. I assume this fall, I think the big issue that people don't mention is school. It's not airplanes, it's not whatever, but it's if parents with kids in school, or if parents can put their kids in school and not have to homeschool them, when that happens, people will be able to go to the office. Until that happens, people are going to be working from home. So I think, you know, the summer is obviously out because kids aren't in school, but I think this fall, we're going to see most schools reopening in person, if not almost all of them. And I would think we're going to see a lot of companies opening in person in response.
Yeah, I would agree that this fall is probably most likely. But it's interesting to think about what historically has been slow times of year, especially for New Orleans. But during this COVID season, it's not. Like summer probably won't be as slow as like past summers because there's just not as much going on. Festival season is not a thing this spring. So I wonder if we'll actually have a lot of progress building up this spring and then like setting some groundwork and then really hit the road running in the fall.
I agree. I think we'll know a lot more in August and September than we do today.
Okay.
So we do have a question in the chat from Evan Nickel. He said he is participating from Austin. Hello, Evan. He says, I'm curious if you're seeing more commercial space opportunities within multifamily spaces as kind of a bridge between the work from home to the back in the office.
Mm-hmm. I haven't specifically, but I've toured a user who was interested in leasing the space for childcare on the ground floor and then having like co-working office space upstairs so people could drop their child off downstairs and then work upstairs. So instead of like working from home, working in like a designated office space near their child. So it's kind of similar, I guess, to like that multifamily idea of like, if you had like childcare downstairs or office spaces downstairs and the residents above, where the children could be doing their schoolwork from home in the apartment above, and then you could go to your office space below. I think that is definitely something that people are thinking about in the market in general. And so I think it could definitely trend that way. I haven't done any specific deals yet, but I think that people have that mindset of wanting to do that.
Hi, Evan. It's good to connect. I think that one of the issues about real estate is that it's just, again, there's long lead times. Projects take a long time to develop. So even if people are responding to what's happening now, you don't see that product being developed for a while. Maybe in small one-off buildings. The one example that does come to mind, though, that we have seen a developer try to take this on locally is the domain companies with South Market. And it's not directly connected, but they built a shop above the CAC, a co-working space, 2 floors of offices for a variety of different people. And a few blocks away, they've built a number of apartment buildings, close to 1,000 units. And there's back and forth between people who live there and between people who work there. And I think Domain would tell you that both projects are strengthened because of their proximity to the other. You also see Felicity Development, which has a large presence for New Orleans in New Orleans, in building housing and whatnot in the Lower Garden District, looking to build new office product so that people can live and work closer together. I mean, it's not the same project. It's not exactly tied together, but I think you're looking at, there's only a few developers in New Orleans who are large enough to kind of think on that scale, but the ones that are, I think, are thinking about developing things close together.
What's something that you need to know? And Austin, you brought up a good point about the difference in pricing, but what are things that people need to think about when they're looking at smaller spaces, either if they're coming from a larger space or if they're coming from working from home? And Genevieve, you brought it up, parking, what you're responsible for. What are some things that people forget about if they're moving from a big institutional landlord to maybe even a smaller, family landlord?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you go, Genevieve.
Oh, no, it's fine. Office operations, I feel like everything from like who's going to make the coffee to like who's stocking the printer paper in the printer. We've had a lot of people, choose certain options based on like they didn't want to have to pay a staff member to do those things. So, or vice versa. So, and I'm sure Austin can speak to that with the towers as well. So yeah, there's a lot of like just basic office operations that people will have to handle themselves, who's taking out the garbage, that kind of thing, or janitorial considerations. There's a lot to factor in for sure.
To build on to that point, Genevieve mentioned it earlier, they originally started leasing their building in Carondelet as a triple net or modified gross, and then they convert it to a gross lease structure and you should always clarify, everybody means slightly different things when they use those terms, but a gross lease means that everything is included. I mean, again, I'm in Place St. Charles, somebody comes and empties the wastebasket every day. If a light bulb goes out, we call somebody. Actually, Place St. Charles is unique. There's a separate utility charge, but basically everything's included. Whereas if you go to a smaller building, that's probably not the case, almost definitely not the case. And I think most of that is okay for tenants because it's not a kitchen, most stuff is not breaking. However, I would advise you to think about the conditioning. I mean, if you're responsible for the air conditioning because you're leasing space that was traditionally a rental, a retail rental, or it's a triple net lease, and it breaks and you're on the hook for $10,000 of repair, that won't hurt. The other thing I want to mention is build out on the very front end. I mean, if you're working with an institutional type landlord or professional landlord, they've most likely underwrote their deals with some tenant improvement allowance where they are prepared to build out the space. I mean, that might be just putting in painting or putting in carpet, might mean completely remodeling that. And if you go to the towers, for example, if you sign a 3-year deal, pretty much every landlord will paint and do some minor work. That's not always the case in a smaller family-owned building or an individually owned building. And Louis, you mentioned parking. I think that's a really important concern and something that really is a benefit outside of the CBD. I mean, pre-COVID, this was a conversation people were having. All the development downtown, all the new apartments, the hotels, the retail is great, makes it livable. Also makes it more congested, makes parking more difficult, and it's getting expensive. And you can't sign a parking contract for 5 years like you would sign an office lease. So you don't necessarily know what your parking costs are going to be. If you're outside of the CBD in a smaller, more unique space, you probably aren't going to get free. I mean, you probably don't have parking included with the space. I mean, generally these buildings don't have lots, but they probably do have street parking available, and that can result in substantial savings.
Knowing your parking is always very important in New Orleans. Okay, I want to get to quickly before the top of the hour and we say goodbye. I want to get to 2 questions. Rebecca O'Brien from GNO Inc. She said, are you seeing companies look to downsize because people are going to be shifting how many days a week they're in the office, or is it too early to see that?
I mean, we've seen that. We get a lot of people coming through the hub that like want to tour it to figure out like how many desks should they lease for like the people that want to come to work, and then the people that might be working from home, and then should they just do, so having like, that's what I started out with, and that's what Austin touched on too, is flexibility and accessibility are like the top 2 keys right now. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that. And I think it's really hard for employers that are trying to figure out what to do and how to take their company in the right direction and keep everybody happy and keep everyone safe. So we're definitely seeing that for sure.
But at the same time, I mean, office space remains very cheap in New Orleans. And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen landlords work to increase those prices. I mean, you've seen, quarter per square foot, 50 cents per square foot, something annual escalations. And I don't think people are going to get away from that. I mean, the operating expenses go up, the cost of construction goes up. So I think you're seeing a lot more flexibility on the front end. Landlords saying that, okay, we'll do some sort of discounted rent for a period where we step into it. But they want to get back to their underwritten rental rates. And the other thing is that a lot of times tenants are going to pay more for the flexibility. So if you are looking at signing a 1-year lease versus a 3-year lease or a 5-year lease or whatever, you're going to pay more. It might not be a lot more, but there'll be something. So again, I think as companies are approach landlords and say, can I sign a 1-year renewal or extension, or can I do this or that or the other thing? The landlords are going to say, okay, we'll consider it, but you have to pay us a premium. And I think it will happen.
So Paul Richard, who's a previous virtual site tour guest, asked 3 questions. Both of you two just answered those. The first one, do you see rates softening? Sounds like y'all are saying maybe temporarily, but not, there's got to be the increase eventually. And then he also said, do landlords have to be more flexible today? I think, you know, everything we've talked about today says yes. This is interesting. Are you seeing shorter leases, and are there COVID clauses in leases? Is that a thing? Can you say, I want out of my lease if I have a health crisis and can't be in the building?
We're seeing shorter leases, yes, but the COVID clause, not necessarily with office. I feel like that's really more with kind of like retail or just like standard commercial, like restaurants that have a lot of like foot traffic coming in and out, but not as much with office, but definitely shorter.
I think to Genevieve's point, again, if you're a restaurant, you cannot operate, you cannot generate revenue. You can't do very much, and landlords have to work with you in some capacity there. If it's office space, it's a line item on your expenses. It might be the biggest or one of the biggest, but it's still something you should still be able to function and work with. So I have not really seen that in office-based deals.
Cool. Well, Genevieve and Austin, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everybody else for joining. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please feel free to reach out to me. I can also share Genevieve and Austin's contact information. Obviously, there's so much to talk about in commercial real estate in New Orleans that changes so quickly these days. So we have our dates for the rest of the year for the virtual site tours. We'll have one in May, September, and November, kind of avoiding the summer slump when so many people are out of town. But looking forward to September. September will be really interesting to see, you know, where we are at that point. But if anybody has any topics, somebody threw out a kind of review of the co-working spaces, because we have had some changes in co-working spaces in the past year. And we've also had interest from co-working space developers looking at the market. So I think we'll still see a lot of change, and it'll be interesting to talk about. So thanks everybody, stay safe. I hope by May 18th, everybody will have the opportunity to have a vaccine, at least one shot. But thanks for joining us, stay safe, and thank you for your interest in New Orleans. And thanks to Valerie and Chandra for helping us get everything together from the NOLA BA side.
Thanks all.
Have a good one.
Oh.